Hello YouTube, this is Sam Gerrans from quarternight.com. Today is Tuesday the 14th of December 2021 and I'm going to continue with my series of talks or expositions of surahs between 50 and the end of the Quran. And I think it's Surah 73 if my memory does not deceive me, in which in the first 5-10 minutes I explain in brief what my interest is in these particular surahs. But we're just going to sort of plod on and just get through the next one, which is Surah 85. So we'll just jump straight into it. By the sky full of constellations, by the promised day, and by the witness and the witnessed. All right, we'll just go back to this, to the beginning. Now, the Quran has many oaths. They are, not all of them, but an awful lot of them are, in fact, I would say almost all of them, are in this segment between 50 and 114. And oaths are designed to bring your attention to something specific. Now, it's not just, oh, look at that, now I'm going to talk about this. The oaths are always relevant to the subject, that's coming. And most of these surahs pretty much are either referencing, there is a segment of about 10 surahs between 57 and 66, something like that, 67, which not quite don't fit into this category, but the vast majority of these surahs reference punishment already known to have happened to the people of Noah, the people of Ad, Thamud, and so on, and using that to leverage to the day of judgment as the final outcome of all things. So that's what's generally being talked about. Now, these oaths reference something that you can see in order to imply or to point towards, to signpost something that you haven't seen yet. Now, by the sky full of constellations. So we live in a world which is completely divorced from the sky, because we can't see the sky. Because if you live in a city, there are lights everywhere, street lights, which pretty much block out the sky. But to traditional man, the sky was a fundamental, integral part of his life. And the constellations that rotate through the year, as the sun works its way through the main constellations of the signs of the zodiac, everybody would be able to tell you. I mean, some people, if you're sort of into what's called today astrology, then people will know. But outside of that, the mixture, the distinction between what's called today astronomy, although I would sort of take issue with that, and what's called today astrology, that distinction didn't exist then. So it was one science. And people knew whereabouts in the sky they were, and you knew that as the year progressed, you would go through the constellations, even if they're constellations that the sun travels through during the course of the year, or whether they weren't. Traditional man was acutely aware of the sky, of what was going on above him. So here's the oath. Here's the first oath. By the sky full of constellations. Now, implicit in this is something which, this has become a bit of a byword, but as above, so below. Again, to traditional man, the idea that what happened in the heavens had a direct bearing on what happened on earth, and vice versa. This was just understood. You wouldn't have to have a big debate about that. It's only today that man's become so materialistic. He thinks that he's disconnected entirely from creation. And of course, the NASA stroke Darwin stroke Big Bang stroke Lawrence Krauss kind of mythology serves to compound that and make you feel atomized and that you're not a part of what God has created. But for traditional man, that wasn't the case. He knew that he was a part of it. He wasn't deceived by all of this nonsense. Maybe he was deceived by other things, but he knew that he was a part, or created within a whole, and above him is this clock, which it is, which essentially marks the years, the months, the moons, and not only is it a clock, but it's a clock that changes very imperceptibly year by year as it goes through the great procession of the kind of the grand year. He knew all this. So he knew that, okay, let's say we're in, whatever it is today, and 3 moons hence will be in whatever the constellation will be then. It's a way of referencing something which was germane to everybody's life in order to indicate something that hadn't happened at that point. So you've lived through, put it into modern terms, okay? It's December now. We understand that months go, and it will be, all things being equal, December again. It isn't the 2nd of December yet, but we know by virtue of what we've experienced that it will come. This is what this is doing, okay? It's referencing what's known and seen to signal something which is not known and seen, but which can be inferred from what is known and seen. And this is something that only really man can do. It's the ability to abstract, to think abstractly, and to infer. In fact, this is the kind of the root of taqwa. It's the prudent fear. It's being able to work out something that hasn't happened yet, but will happen, to plan accordingly on the basis of an intellectual decision. That is what taqwa is. That's all it is. Nothing else in God's creation can do this. Everything else operates on instinct. Man alone can do this. Now, of course, instinct plays some part in it, but only man can make that decision. And it is a decision to operate in that way. And that's what distinguishes us. That's why we bear such a high responsibility. Anyway, to continue. By the sky full of constellations, and by the promised day. Well, what is the promised day? The promised day is the end of all things. It is the hour. It is this thing that hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen. Other things have happened. You've had days before, right? Well, this is going to be the same as that, but different. That's what these oaths are for. They're to call to your attention, not just look at this big thing and now look at this. It's this big thing which you know about, which you've experienced, relates to this other big thing that you haven't experienced yet, but is definitely coming. And by the witness and the witnessed. Well, I mean, that can be understood in many different ways. We do know that human beings, we have a writer on the right hand and on the left that writes down everything that we say. We know that the angels witness. We know that God is witness to all things. And we witness each other. So on the day of judgment, the witnesses will be called. To continue, damned be the companions of the trench, of the fuel-filled fire, when they sit over it, and are, of what they do with the believers, witnesses. Now, obviously, this is relating back to witness again, witness of evil deeds. Now, the traditionalists will have a story, a set of stories, or some conflicting stories, or some stories that is agreed upon, and various people have said this is a true story. Who knows? We don't know, relating to this particular aspect of the Quran. But what is true is that if you hold to God alone and you stick by it, you're going to have problems with the world, as we shall see. We'll continue. And they resent them only that they believe in God, the exalted in might, the praiseworthy, to whom belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and God is witness over all things. So there you are. Now, it's very difficult for people to kind of shake off the shackles of their of religious nomenclature. Excuse me. And I should think it's particularly difficult for people, especially as treats of the Quran, who were born into what are called Muslim societies. But the fact is that the labels we give ourselves are not going to really count. They're not going to count for anything actually on the Day of Judgment. The Quranic definition of Muslim is well, it's certainly something other than what Muslims claim. I mean, Abraham was Muslim. Did he say the Shahada? No, he didn't. So I mean, clearly it's something different. What we find today is that, and this is writ to large and more graphically as we're working our way through the New World Order agenda, is that really there are two kind of religions. There is the materialistic religion, which breaks down everything into matter and is essentially a pantheistic religion of stuff. I don't just mean owning stuff, but that stuff is the cause rather than the effect. And then there is another religion, which is that God is the creator of all things. Now, here it says, and they resent them only that they believe in God, the exalted in might, the praiseworthy. What we've had over the last, 100 years, starting about 1917, we had the communists over there and the capitalists over here, and there was this sort of kind of false dichotomy between the two. But actually, they're both the same. They're both essentially and fundamentally materialistic religions. They're just sort of, it's just sort of like Sunnis and Shias. They just don't agree on some of the finer details, but they're agreed on the basics. And now those things have been merged together, as was planned, I think, before that even happened. And now they've done that work, and they created new enemies, sort of the terrorists and all that. Although the terrorists, I have to say, they're very quiet these days, aren't they? Now they've done their job, and now you're the problem, because you won't agree to submit to this. This is my point. This religion of materialism, which is what it is. It's fundamentally obeisance before government power, just temporal power. So it says here, and they resent them only that they believe in God, the exalted in might, the praiseworthy, to whom belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth. They don't like that. If you say, no, I'm not going to play your game. I don't believe in your government. I don't believe in your agenda. I don't believe in this humanitarian religion, which changes and chops and changes its moral. I use that word, with all the irony which it deserves, with their changing moral stances. If you don't believe in that, they will come after you, and they are coming after you. We know, we went through Nazi Germany. We know that they just chip away. First they came for the trades unions, and then they came for this, and then they came for that, and then they came for the Jews, and then at last they came for me, and there was no one to defend me. Well, that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing now, and they're making anybody who doesn't willingly, in fact enthusiastically, embrace this nonsense, and it is nonsense. You're not just exercising your individual right to choose. No, you're a problem, and they've got an answer for that. You'll be getting, the special one reserved for the problem people. Because this system requires, if you haven't noticed, if you have been asleep completely for the last 50, 60 years, you will have missed it. But if you haven't been totally asleep, you will have noticed that it doesn't just want you to kind of put up with what it's doing. Let's just take the sodomite agenda. It wasn't, I'm old enough to remember when they brought that in really through comedies. Often they use comedy to kind of, acclimatize people to this idea. And they were presented as these, artistic, somewhat misunderstood, generally very cultured, articulate, intelligent, rapier-like wit, compassionate people through comedies. And in my lifetime, it's gone from that. And people go, oh, well, it's, wouldn't want him in the club, old boy, but, okay, And now we've gone to, they're literally singing songs about they're coming for your children. Okay, that's 50 years. Boom, there you are. That's how quickly people work through, kind of marched through these agenda items. So it's not just that they're not just like you just have to put up with it. No, you have to celebrate. You have to applaud what they're doing, this agenda. And this is fundamentally a socialistic, and I use the word socialist not in the kind of, I don't mean sort of, Tory socialist kind of false dichotomy. It is socialism in the sense that it's fundamentally materialistic. And the other thing that socialism has as part of its materialism is it has to assume that anything that goes wrong is the fault of, not your fault, not that you did something wrong. There's no personal responsibility involved in this. Oh, no. No, it's that the system failed to provide you with enough stuff because in its ideology, it's all about nurture. If you put anybody into this environment, they'll come out this because there's your soul has got no input into this. The communists did exactly the same thing. Lenin, one of the first things they did was, the communist ideology was that it was all about nurture, nothing to do with nature whatsoever, is they put some total pleb in as the head of the economy, the Minister of Finance. He just wrecked it. Well, I mean, you know, it's pretty wrecked anyway, but he completely destroyed the economy because actually you do need to know something. It does matter who does stuff. There are actual, abilities and skills and, personal responsibilities. Anyway, all that to say is that this way of seeing the world is fundamentally materialistic. And it doesn't matter where you live, whether you're living in the so-called, communist China, or the so-called, they used to call it the Free West. I don't think anybody calls it that anymore. Or the formerly delusionally Free West. It's all materialistic. It doesn't matter. It's sheer Sunni, this kind of false dichotomy. Anyway, going back to my point is that it says here, and they resent them only that they believe in God. Now, believe in God, not just like blah, 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 I have a badge, sort of, I'm a Sunni, I'm a Shia, I'm a Christian. No, when you say no and you won't go down, you're not down for this, what they want you to do on the basis of the fact that you respect God more than you respect them, you'll find out how tolerant they are. Just as we found out how tolerant the Sodomites are, just as we're finding out how tolerant all these other so-called oppressed groups are, because they're being financed to eat away, to chew away at the tree so that it falls down. That's what they're doing. This is a war strategy we're living through. But fundamentally, it's materialistic. So what I'm trying to say, I know a lot of people who watch this channel come from, what I would call sort of brand Islam backgrounds. You will have been told a story about verses 4 through 7. What I'm trying to say is that maybe that's true. Who knows? But what is definitely true is that this materialistic religion, if you refuse to go along with it, it will come after you. As we're seeing now, if I said these sorts of things 4 or 5 years ago, Sam Gerrans, he's all right, but he's a bit of a wide-eyed conspiracy theorist. Now, I think, I expect, like a lot of people who awake to all this stuff a long time ago, you'll have found that none of your families came and said, oh, yes, by the way, I'm really sorry that I've been calling your names for the last 30 years. You were right. No, that forget about that. That's never going to happen. Something I discovered about sheep, you may not know this, but sheep, they continue to graze as they're dying. Actually lying on the ground, still trying to graze. You can't overcome $1 trillion worth of indoctrination. I wouldn't even try. Anyway, to continue. Those who subject... let's go back a bit to verse 9. To whom belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and God is witness over all things. So remember, by the witness and the witnessed, God is witness over all things. These people think that no one sees them. They think nobody sees them. They think they're not going to have to give an account, because if they did, they wouldn't do what they're doing right now. They think that the normal morals that you and I, even if we don't keep to them 100%, we know that they are operative. They don't believe in this. They think this is for the morons. They think that they've transcended all of that and that they don't have to give an account, that they're part of the great work which they receive from their fathers are going to pass down to their sons, and it's all about how to fleece you lot. You see, you and me, we are we're the herd, and that's how they make their money. That's how they sort of fortify their fortresses and all the rest of it. Now they're changing. They're moving the herd from the old pasture, the old plantation, to the new plantation. The new plantation is going to be it's using kind of keywords of diversity and so on in order to achieve total conformity. In the new plantation, there will be no difference. None. It'll just be a big mishmash of nothing. And they're using setting off groups against each other in order to get there in the big crucible. And by the time people have worked out what's going on, it'll be too late, because all of the differences, the real diversity, which is fantastic, that's all going to be gone. That's all going to be gone. And in fact, if you work in corporations, if anybody watching this, you work in a corporation, this is already true. It doesn't matter what people look like. They all basically say the same thing. If you haven't seen it, so I was jumping around a little bit here, but Microsoft, our good friends Microsoft, just how insane it is. I haven't worked in the corporate world for, I can't remember, about 10 or 12 years now. But I used to, and through gritted teeth, but how it's gone now. Microsoft, look it up. It looks like a joke. It looks like it's like a trolling thing, but it's not. It's real. Microsoft have got I think it's a training video or it's some sort of thing, training video, where they have to introduce themselves. And of course, if you work for a corporation, you have to be enthusiastic. It's always, you have to, they don't just want your slavery. They want your faith. These poor saps. There's a man and a woman, and they introduce themselves and they say, "Hello, my name is whatever it is, Anthony, and I identify as a white male, and my preferred pronouns are he and his and him." And then the woman introduces herself, and she's half German, half Polynesian, and her preferred pronouns are. And you watch, you think this is a joke, right? In a minute, Mark Dice is going to come out of top left with a microphone. No, this is real. This is the nonsense they have these people doing. So what I'm trying to say is the system. You remember we're talking about sodomites. They don't want you just to put out with it. They want you to celebrate it. That's how the corporate world works as well. This is how capitalism as a materialistic religion works. It's just exactly like communism. Interesting point, slightly off topic, but I'm going to say this anyway. I live in Russia. I happen to have a degree in Russian and I speak Russian. So I spent a lot of time here. It's just somewhere I know about. And the fact is that when the corporations, I was here in the early 90s. I mean, I haven't lived through all that time, but I happened to be here. So 1991, 1992. When these big corporations, the communism had sort of collapsed and they were building so-called capitalism. And I just happened to know a lot of young, very bright Russians who were working in Coca-Cola and all of these companies that just came to Russia, okay? And I remember a girl, she was very bright, working for one of these big name, brand name corporations. And she said to me, it was very interesting, she said, the difference between the Americans and the Russians was that, like, for example, when American watches TV and they see all of these car chases and gunfights and all of this, they know it's fake. They know that isn't, I mean, we'll leave Detroit out of it, okay? But generally speaking, that's not most people's reality. They don't all drive around like complete lunatics and having gunfights out the back of the back of the car and stuff. They know it's a story. They know it. They take it in that light. Whereas Russians, when they watched this stuff, because they'd never had it before, they were horrified. They really thought that this was, what do they know? I mean, this seemed to be what was going on in the West, so they took all of this like much more seriously. But conversely, for Americans, when they had all of these rah-rahs and we're working together to increase profits by 5% over a 5-year plan and stuff, and the Americans are getting they think it's all very real for them. For Russians, they're just sitting there like, this is communism. We have had this before. They just knew it was nonsense. What I'm trying to get to in a roundabout way is that this dichotomy is a false dichotomy. Obviously, the Iron Curtain, it was never very iron in my view. Same people running both sides, but that's all gone away. What I'm trying to say is that if you want to know where things are going, especially if you're looking at political so-called parties, forget about what they say they disagree upon. Look at what they agree upon. That'll tell you where it's all going. And the communist capitalist dichotomy, they agree on materialism. That's what they agree upon. They don't agree upon God. They agree upon materialism. That's the one thing. That's just assumed. Of course, you can have a kind of pretend religion as an add-on, as a bolt-on, as a sort of like people wear badges, whatever their little thing is. You can have that, but you can't make it the core of your life. So that's the point that I'm trying to get to. The first thing the communists did in this country was go on a Christian murdering spree. They murdered, and destroying churches. That's what they really believed in. After a certain amount of time, I mean, there are some differences in the way that the Russian Orthodox Church works vis-a-vis how, for example, Roman Catholicism works. It's always been much, much closer in with power. I'm not saying the Catholic Church is nice or good or anything. I'm not saying that, but there are some fundamental differences in the way that it works. So that changed over time, and they decided to sort of let people have a bit of religion. What I'm trying to say is, fundamentally, they are materialistic. By materialistic, well, essentially means is that material created everything. That's what it really fundamentally gets down to. In the beginning, there was nothing. Nothing created something, and something created everything. That's what it comes right down to, when it comes right down to it. And that, that in a sort of, if you're going to reduce it to its essence, and either you believe that, if you do, then you're a materialist. If you don't believe it, then you're not. And I'm trying to say that this is the fundamental division, the furqan, and it's going to become much more important as time goes on, because what they're doing right now is they are insisting upon submission to a system, a materialistic system that is going to be not only in your information, but in your genetics and those of your children forever. It wants your total submission. But submission is for God alone. And this difference is what we're going through right now. So if I'm belaboring the point, I apologize, but I just wanted to kind of really hit this, because this isn't about, I identify as this. It's the socialists who identify as stuff. They always identify as with the new socialism. I identify as as a cross-dressing hamster or something, and it's all about their identity, not about what they actually do, not about their actual works, not about what they do in the world. No, it's just about some delusion that they've got, that they want you, in fact, insist that you acquiesce with and sort of go along with, preferred pronouns. That's where you get to with that craziness. So that's one stream. And the other stream of people saying, no, there is a thing called reality. Nothing did not create everything. And, I know I'm going to have to give an account. And this is the fundamental difference. It's not down to what you call yourself. Who cares what you call yourself? Okay, to continue. Those who subject the believing men and the believing women to means of denial, then repent not. They have the punishment of Gehenna, and they have the punishment of the consuming fire, which is going to be something of a surprise for them, because this is the defining characteristic of those who don't believe, is that they don't believe in hell. Sometimes they'll say, they're okay with heaven. That kind of goes, look, that comports with what they want. But what I've discovered, what I've seen in my life, is that rejectors have got a real problem with hell. But how could there not be one, given what the evildoers do in the world? Old man Rockefeller, David Rockefeller, died a few years back, had 6 heart transplants. Didn't save him though, did it? Now, if he's just got off scot-free, if he's just sort of wafted over into the VIP lounge of post-life experience, and he's just, gliding across the plush carpets of his 6-star, residence, I'm going to have questions. But we know that's not true. We know that isn't true. And we know it because in nature we know that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So unless God forgives you, and actually to be forgiven you have to ask for forgiveness, he has his sins on his account. So this story isn't over, but that's why they're making you so afraid now. A new variant has come out. I knew this has happened. The worst thing that can happen to you possibly is that you're going to die. No, it's not. There are lots of worse things that can happen to you than dying, like going to hell forever. Like this, they have the punishment of the consuming fire. I don't care what variant you come up with. It's going to be a walk in the park compared to the punishment of the consuming fire, which doesn't ever end. So again, you have to choose. Which is it? I want my shopping mall back. I want this back. I want that back. Quick side note, and I wrote about this when I used to write for. I had an op-ed in a paper for a while, as a sort of side gig. Airports were training for this, and I knew it at the time. I watched this at the time because I used to have to travel as part of my main job an awful lot. And when I went through airports, I mean, the guys at airports look at my passport and they just stop and just see other countries. They say, when you ever at home? I said, not much. Just full of stamps. I used to get through passports quite quickly. Anyway, all that to say is after 9/11, after the big terrible thing, obviously airports changed, and they really put you through this. And it was a humiliation ritual. It was a ritual of humiliation, of taking your belt off and then doing this and this, and then they're X-raying you and blah blah blah. But the whole thing was that you knew that after this ritual humiliation, there would be duty free, and you kind of come out the other side into this. After you've been through this made up ritual, you come out into this kind of pseudo heaven where things all look great, nice and slightly cheaper, but not much. But you have this kind of going through a compression chamber and coming out the other side, popping out the other side into somewhere wonderful. This was a training program to get you used to a kind of, I suppose it's a combination of Stockholm syndrome and, that thing where people want to please, I suppose, Stockholm syndrome, where people want to please their abusers. It's that, but now we've got this in everything. I don't know if it's like where it's like where you live. Where I live, I can't go to any kind of larger shop. Can't go on public transport. I can still go to the gym, which I've just come back from, only because they don't really care there. But everywhere else you have to, unless you've bought a QR code, which a lot of people here have, you can't go anywhere. I haven't bought one. It's not that I wouldn't buy one, but I'm not going to. I'm certainly going to hold back on it. And I'll tell you why, because I think that they know who's bought them. And I think they're going to use that as leverage. I can see the way it's going here. What they'll say is, we know you bought it, unless you accept, this thing, you're going to prison. So I think I can see why people do it, but I'm certainly going to hold back. I think it's a bit of a trap, that one. Anyway, all that to say is that, hell is real, and they want you to forget about that. They want you to be really terrified about the things that they say you should be terrified of. But what about the things that God says you should be terrified of? Oh, they're not terrified of those things at all. How interesting. Anyway, let's continue. Those who heed warning, or those who believe, depending on how you understand that. Inna alladhina amanu, those who, let's say who have believed, or those who, in the broader context, have heeded warning and therefore believe, and do righteous deeds. They have gardens beneath which rivers flow. And that is the great achievement. So that's the great achievement. Not trying to bend over sufficiently that government will give you a little, whatever, a special little chip or this, that and the other, that you have been verified. You are, I don't know, verified is the right word, but you've been approved. That's it. You are now, you can kind of sail through what all these other people are stuck in queues and being, frisked. And we're all Palestinians now. You know the whole Palestinian thing? That was psychologically not only obviously doing terrible things to the Palestinians themselves, but again, everybody knows, kind of used to the idea there's these second-class citizens who all can be treated like rubbish, whilst other people, just because they happen to be approved, glide through, drive on different roads, don't have to go through all these checks, can carry guns, can have these rights, can do all these other things. So this two-tier system has been in your mind all of your life. It's been churned out through media and so on. The idea being that if you check the right boxes and conform in the right way and bend over fast enough and enthusiastically enough, you too can be approved. Anyway, but according to the Quran, that is the great achievement. Let's find out what the great achievement is. Let's see if it's having the right QR code or if it's something else. Those who heed warning and do righteous deeds, those two things, they have gardens beneath which rivers flow. That is the great achievement. I see all my life people telling me what you should work for. I don't know about you, but when I got to like 13, after having had 8 years or whatever it was of schooling and, a liberal upbringing, I grew up around libtards, I was depressed. Who wouldn't be? I couldn't really see any point of doing anything. It just all seemed so completely pointless. And again, this was I think fundamentally I couldn't agree with their whole materialistic religion. I don't know, I could have expressed it in those terms at that time, but it just seemed they hadn't thought it through. We were all supposed to be enthusiastic about getting stuff. And I was thinking, well, okay, stuff is okay. Yeah, it's better to have some stuff than no stuff. I can certainly see that. But I just fundamentally, I think life, in fact, even what I would say caste system, and I think there is a natural caste system, breaks down into different categories. Categories of people who ask how much. You know, these would be like the merchant class. And you need those people. If you don't have it, society collapses. But then you've got people like me. And the question I want to answer is why? You know, I don't mind stuff and I don't mind all these other things, but why? Why? What's the point of it? And this wasn't like a rhetorical question to bathe myself in more melancholy. I actually wanted to know why. And so, and if you look at the materialistic religions of capitalism, communism, scientism, all these other stuff, they never answer that. In fact, they almost pride themselves in not deigning to look at that. But that has got to be, without that, all the rest of it's just nonsense. And if you look at a bit of history, and you will have to buy books now that have not been printed in the last 40, 50 years, because pretty much most of that is just pants. But if you can get hold of actual history books before they were completely sanitized, you'll find out there was this time called the Middle Ages. And in the Middle Ages, people had science, but they didn't use it to hate God. they had a completely different way of seeing the world. Now, I'm not saying we all have to go back to the Middle Ages, but if you talk to people about the Middle Ages now, they seem to think that they were living under a rock somewhere. These were really brilliant. Some of them were very brilliant men. I mean, for example, I discovered the astrolabe recently. If you don't know what an astrolabe is, astrolabe, L-A-B-E at the end. Look up astrolabes. This was basically the the smartphone of the Middle Ages. Thomas Aquinas. I mean, there was fantastically intelligent men and women living at that time. It wasn't this benighted, terrible time of nothing happening ever. And quite frankly, since then, all we've done is eradicate the notion of God from our national and cultural and social discourse. Considering ourselves wise, we've become fools. And what's happening now is that's being formalized. They don't just want your say-so. They want this in blood now. That's what they're coming after. And what I'm trying to get to in this is that there are two basic religions. And what's it called? Berdyaev had a book, the kingdom of the soul and the kingdom of the Caesar. Well, where we are now is the kingdom of the Caesar is coming to get its lunch, and what it wants is you. That's what it's doing. So let's continue. Those who heed warning and do righteous deeds, they have gardens beneath which rivers flow. That is the great achievement. The might of thy Lord is strong. He it is who originates, and he repeats, and he is the forgiving, the loving, owner of the throne, the glorious, doer of what he intends. There you are. That's the answer. That's what's true. So, according to this book, if you don't believe this book, okay, that's fine. Roll up your sleeves and say goodbye to your posterity. Me, I believe in God. Has there come to thee the account of the forces of Pharaoh and of Thamud? Well, if you don't know anything about Pharaoh and Thamud, I haven't really got time to kind of recount the entire thing here, but in essence, if you know the Quran, at least to some degree, you will know that both of those civilizations or communities were utterly destroyed. They went through a process, I call it the God Protocol, where they were warned on the basis of a very particular set of actions. They rejected, and then they were utterly destroyed. In my view, we are at that point absolutely now. There's no way out of this now. You couldn't put this back. They're too far gone. People are totally delusional. I mean, I'm talking about the massive people. And the people who run things have lost any sense of noblesse oblige. I'm personally, if you don't know me, don't know my channel, don't know how I think, I'm not against there being a ruling elite. It's natural. There should be one. Every iceberg has a peak. It's just natural. There are just people who are richer, smarter, stronger, who do what they want. It's just how it is. If you don't like it, you don't like reality. Maybe I don't like reality either. But that is how it actually is. Now, the problem is that those people are done with you. Now the bogs have been drained. The roads are built. The cities have been done. Talking about cities, if you've noticed, all cities, I've travelled a lot in the world and I've seen that everywhere. America, it really shocked me. Most of the houses in America are made out of cardboard. You could knock them down in a week. You could see that the actual city often is just this central bit, and the rest of it's just going to be bulldozed, quite quickly. So they're done with you. They don't need useless eaters anymore. You're just a drain on resources. You're using up all of what they think is theirs. And the fact that you built all of this, well, they just forgot about that, because the way they see it is you belong to them. You are their herd, and they used you for this. Just like a farmer would say, well, okay, I don't need this kind of cow this year. I'm going to go over to sheep. Okay. Nobody would criticize them for just making a business decision. Well, that's how they see this, you see. But they always make money on every big thing, or every little thing, but certainly on all the big things that they do. And they're going to make money on this. They are making money. At the moment, they're kind of giving this out for free. But believe me, it's just to get you, into paying sort of on the what's it called? The thing that goes through the factories on this sort of escalator, on this kind of conveyor belt. And once you've had a few of these things, you see, you're going to actually not want more. You're going to have more. You're going to have them. The whole discourse is going to change from, this terrible thing happening to that terrible thing happening to now you need this. Just remember how anti-virus software works. I mean, for me, it's a lot easier. Okay, I live in a country where the government of this country, according to Solzhenitsyn, some people, say it's a few more, some people say it's a few less, but murdered, murdered around 60 million people in the last century. 60 million. It's called democide, death by government. And now we're living under a one-world government, which is quite obviously the case because they all agree upon absolutely everything that's important. And now what's changed is that before, in the West, people felt a bit smug and they felt like they were having a hard day if they couldn't get the right kind of cappuccino. Now it's come to bite them at last. At last, they've been kept from it all before. In the third world, we've always known about these sorts of things. One thing in Russia you never ever get is any kind of friction when you say to people that you don't trust the government. Oh, who trusts the government? Of course you don't trust the government. I mean, that was just what kind of idiot trusts the government? That's most people in this country. There's always been most people in this country. In the West, it was a bit different, But it's changing a bit, but it's too late. It won't matter. You couldn't put this back now. It's too late. There's no way out of this. Get used to it. They're never going to stop. It doesn't matter how many people wake up. They've planned it all. They know exactly what they're doing. They never start anything and they usually create their own enemies. Just think about it, right? We were supposed to be terrified about, I'll call them tourists, about tourists. Tourism was this thing we had to watch out for because all of these tourist organizations across the world doing all these evil things, where are they all gone? And if they were real, right, if they were real, and they were against the system, you think they couldn't just kidnap a few major players' children or themselves and get this all to stop? Of course they could in 5 minutes. These cells of well-trained, hardened, military specialists with all of their special gear. Nothing. Crickets. It's all one. They're all on the same side. They always were. And the only real enemy throughout all this is you. You see, it's how it always works. Anyway, I don't even, it's always been that way. In a way, I kind of accept that. My problem with the ruling elite is that they are totally miscreant. And what they've done is, there used to be, I will get back to this in a minute, but there used to be a social contract, which is basically, we will oppress you and fleece you, but kind of protect you from something. And you give us most of everything you've got. It used to be called serfdom, and then they changed it and called it democracy. That's the deal. But they've gone off the reservation of that. They think we don't even need to keep this deal up anymore because they don't like that deal. They want a new deal. And the new deal is going to be you begging for the new thingy in the arm so that you can stay alive in another few months in order to serve them. That's really where they're going, okay? Not mentioning the fact that you won't be able to reproduce, or your children are going to look like frogs, or whatever it is. That's what they're doing. That's literally what they're doing to you. And people are still worried about what's on TV. So what I'm trying to say is there's no way out of this. You can't go back. It's finished. The only way, in my view, is to execute on what I call the God Protocol, which I've done. And if you want to know about that work, you can download it for free. It's called the God Protocol, and you can get it from Quranite.com. You find it in PDF, read the thing, and you'll see what that protocol is, why it fits together, why it's correct, and what I've done to execute on that. Because I don't see any way out of this now except complete destruction. I mean, that might sound like a bit of a downer, and I have to agree. There is, it's come to something when the end of the world is a win. But we are where we are. If you look around you, who here is going to sort this out? Just look around you. People are gone, and it is, sure, a few people get what's going on. How much power have they got? It's over. It's done. It's finished. It's obvious. So what I would argue is get right with God, really, fast and pray, repent, because there is no other way out of this, honestly. They're going to continue. They're never going to stop, and they're going to take away everything that you think you had, and you'll discover that you never had anything. So what do you want to be? Do you want to be the sheep, still grazing, lying there dying, trying to get a few more blades of grass into its mouth? Or do you want to stand up and be a believer in God and accept that what comes with that? And there will be things that come with it. But what they've got, they can't keep. And what you've got, you can't lose. Seems like a pretty clear deal to me. Anyway, let's wrap up. Has there come to thee the account of the forces of Pharaoh and of Thamud? The truth is, those who ignore warning are in denial, but God is behind them, encompassing. The truth is, it is a glorious recitation in a protected tablet. And a glorious recitation here is Quranul Majid, which obviously references Surah 50. And if you read Surah 50, this is a signpost. The Quran's got signposts, and this is a signpost to Surah 50, which is the first surah of this segment between 50 and 114. I highly recommend reading that carefully and thinking about its contents. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. This is much longer, it's run much longer, as usual, than I really wanted. I hope everyone is well, and I hope to drop, well, actually, to be specific, I hope to complete another one of I'm reading the God Protocol onto audio, after which I'll put that on the site and people can download that for free. I hope to get another one of those done this week, and I will see if I can get another one of these surahs done this week as well, God willing. Hello to all those people who kept the last fast with me. We finished that yesterday, God knows, and God will reward you for your taqwa. That's just, these are the great rewards. See, it says that is the great achievement. See, when you invest in the life to come, these are things that this isn't, you're not putting it into like somewhere where it will just get stolen by the bankers. This is safe, this is safe. So invest in what's good. That is the great achievement. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. As I say, I will try to drop another video, and that is all for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Quran and all other work free using the button in the top right-hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. You can download the audio from my YouTube videos to your mobile device using the links in the drop-down below. I recommend meetquranites.com to connect with other Quran-alone believers. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short. Eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.